And welcome to my channel, everybody. This is Duck Duck Book, and I'd like you to meet my little friend. As you can see, he's a connoisseur of great literature. So let me ask you a question. Can a great or even a merely good novel be morally troubling? Or, to put it conversely, can a morally troubling book be great or even merely good? To me, the answer is, of course, yes. I'm sure we've all read older books that are rife with, sexism and outright misogyny, along with outdated views concerning, race and gender. These are all novels that are, products of their time, but are now dated. But almost every novel, whether by Mickey Spillane, Robert Heinlein, or even Charles Dickens, are dated. Every novel becomes dated. And by dated, I don't mean, necessarily artistically obsolete. What I mean by dated is every novel reflects to some degree the values and the assumptions of the era in which it was written. But simply because society's values have changed doesn't mean that that work has lost its literary value. Yet that distinction often disappears once readers review books. Have you ever noticed how many Goodreads reviews and ratings come down to one thing? Someone picks up a classic, say a 19th century classic, or something from the mid-20th century, from the 50s or 60s. They run into a moment that feels offensive by today's standards, whether it's racism, sexism, or gender roles, and the verdict is quickly handed down. This book is dated. From there, then, it's downgraded to 1 star, or even dismissed entirely as a DNF. Now, to be clear, recognizing these issues matters. I'm not downplaying that. If a book contains racism or misogyny, we should name it and talk about it rather than just glossing over it. But where things start to go astray for me is when the jump is made from this book is outdated to this book is horrible. One thought does not necessarily follow from the other. On a forum I was reading a while back, Max Allan Collins, the novelist, replied to someone with, "All novels date. Dickens dates." Now, Dickens, he stands at the pinnacle with the greatest of English language authors. And he's very much a writer of his time, the 19th century, as if you had to be told. His assumptions about class, race, and empire are baked into his works. Even the most progressive writers are shaped by the assumptions of their time. Austen, Dickens, Woolf, they're all dated. That doesn't invalidate their insights. It just reminds us that no one is free from history. So the question for me isn't, is this book dated? Of course it is. But the real question is, what do we do with that as readers? Personally, I don't see my enjoyment of a novel as an endorsement of whatever ideas are written about, in the story. It's simply an act of engagement. When I come across something racist or misogynistic in a novel, I don't adopt it as a belief system for myself. I take it in as a part of a work that may still have great strength in its prose, its characterization, or its storytelling, even if it reflects attitudes that I reject. These flaws are often what makes a book interesting. They tell what people assumed, what went unquestioned, whose voices went missing. And reading older literature isn't about ignoring these things. It's about just taking them along with everything else the book is doing. Literature doesn't operate on just one level. A novel can be ethically troubling in one sense and artistically brilliant in another. You can disagree with what you think may represent an author's personal feelings, and still find their work beautifully written, psychologically insightful, and structurally impressive. But when we reduce that complexity to a simple, it's problematic, so it's bad, we collapse what may be a rich reading experience into a single rash judgment, and we miss everything else the novel has to offer. I mean, not every instance of prejudice or a bias, represents the author's personal beliefs. Sometimes, usually even, those biases belong to just the character in the book. And the author has put it in there to be satirical or ironic. The author is not endorsing it, they're exposing it. And part of reading well is learning to tell the difference. My concern with downgrading books for being dated is that it discourages the very kind of reading we say we value. If we only keep books that line up with our current standards, reading becomes less about exploration and more about unquestioning agreement. We lose that insight into the real, messy, and uncomfortable past. Literature shows us how people justified their world and what they took for granted. That can be unsettling to some readers, but it can also be valuable. None of this is to say that, all older books automatically get a free pass. They don't get a get out of jail free card. We should critique harmful elements and, talk about their impact and consequences. But that shouldn't automatically erase a book's literary value. Interesting reading experiences can come from that tension between being critical about what a book gets wrong while engaging with what it gets right. That conversation between the reader and the past is what keeps literature alive and meaningful. Reading isn't necessarily going to be comfortable. If every book conformed to or confirmed everything we already believe, then literature would have very little to teach us. So, to conclude, every novel becomes dated. That's inevitable. But dated does not have to mean worthless. If anything, it might be what makes the book worth reading in the first place. What do you think? What are your feelings on the matter? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.